Picture this. It's a sweltering July morning in 1518. You're walking the cobblestone streets of Strasbourg, a prosperous city in the Holy Roman Empire. Merchants are setting up stalls, children are playing in the squares, and life seems perfectly normal. Then you turn a corner and witness something that will haunt your nightmares forever. A woman is dancing in the middle of the street, but this is no celebration. This is pure, unbridled terror made flesh. Her feet are bleeding through her shoes, her dress is soaked in sweat, and her eyes hold the wild desperation of someone who cannot stop moving no matter how desperately she wants to. Her name is Frau Troffea, and she's about to trigger one of history's most disturbing and inexplicable mass hysteria events. What started as one woman's bizarre behavior would soon consume hundreds of people, leaving medieval Europe grappling with a plague that killed not through disease, but through exhaustion, heart failure, and the simple, horrifying inability to stop dancing. This is the true story of the dancing plague of 1518, a medical mystery so bizarre that modern science still struggles to explain it, and so terrifying that it reveals the darkest corners of human psychology and medieval society. The first dancer, Frau Troffea, stepped into the narrow street outside her home on July 14, 1518, and began to dance. But calling it dancing is almost an insult to the word. This was something far more disturbing, a violent, uncontrolled thrashing that seemed to possess her entire body. Witnesses described her movements as jerky and wild, like a marionette being controlled by a drunk puppet master. Her arms flailed in directions that seemed to have no purpose, no rhythm, no connection to any dance anyone had ever seen. Her legs kicked and stamped with such force that chunks of stone began chipping away from the cobblestones beneath her feet. But here's what made it truly terrifying. She couldn't stop. Hour after hour, Frau Troffea continued her frenzied movements. When concerned neighbors approached to help her, she pushed them away while continuing to writhe and twist. When they offered her water, she would try to drink while still moving, spilling most of it down her chin and dress. As the sun reached its peak and the July heat became unbearable, Frau Troffea's condition only intensified. Sweat poured from her body, staining her clothes and creating dark puddles on the street around her. Her breathing became labored and desperate, but still she could not stop. The most disturbing detail comes from witness accounts. Frau Troffea was clearly trying to stop. Her face showed absolute terror and exhaustion. She would occasionally cry out in German, begging for help, pleading with God to make it stop, but her body refused to obey her mind. She had become a prisoner in her own flesh, forced to watch helplessly as her limbs continued their relentless, purposeless motion. By evening, a crowd had gathered. Some thought she was possessed by demons. Others believed she had been cursed by a witch. A few suggested she had eaten ergot-contaminated bread, causing hallucinations and convulsions, but no one had an explanation for why she simply could not stop dancing. Night fell, and still Frau Troffea danced. Street lamps and torches were lit to illuminate her continuing ordeal. Concerned citizens took shifts watching over her, bringing blankets when she shivered while still dancing, offering food she couldn't eat while still dancing, and praying for her soul while she writhed in what appeared to be her own personal hell. The contagion spreads. What happened next defies all rational explanation and enters the realm of mass psychological horror. On the second day of Frau Troffea's ordeal, a neighbor named Klaus began experiencing what he described as an overwhelming urge to move. At first, it was just a twitching in his legs and a restless energy that made sitting still uncomfortable. But within hours, Klaus found himself unable to resist the compulsion to dance. Unlike Frau Troffea's wild thrashing, Klaus's dance was different, more structured. almost ballroom-like, but equally uncontrollable. He would waltz with invisible partners, his arms positioned as if holding someone, spinning and stepping in patterns that seemed to follow some internal music only he could hear. The sight of two people dancing uncontrollably in the street drew even larger crowds. Medieval Strasbourg had never witnessed anything like this. Street vendors abandoned their stalls to watch. Priests rushed from the cathedral to witness what many believed was either a miracle or the work of Satan himself. But the real horror was just beginning. By the third day, 6 more people had joined the dance. By the end of the first week, over 30 residents of Strasbourg were trapped in this hellish, involuntary ballet. Each new dancer brought their own variation of the curse. Some moved like Frau Troffea, wild and violent. Others swayed and spun like Klaus. Some appeared to be dancing to military marches, stepping high and saluting invisible commanders. A few moved as if they were at a peasant festival, clapping their hands and stomping their feet in folk rhythms. But what united them all was a complete inability to stop, and the clear terror in their eyes as they realized they had lost control of their own bodies. The spread pattern was particularly disturbing. It wasn't random. People who watched the dancers for extended periods were most likely to be affected. Families who cared for afflicted relatives often found themselves joining the dance within days. The plague seemed to spread through observation, as if the very act of witnessing this bizarre behavior somehow infected the viewer's mind. Dr. Jan Weir, a physician visiting Strasbourg at the time, wrote in his journal, "I have seen plagues of the body that destroy flesh and bone, but this is a plague of the soul, spreading from eye to mind to limb, turning rational human beings into slaves of motion they cannot comprehend or control." The city's response, making it worse, faced with an inexplicable crisis, the city officials of Strasbourg made a decision that would go down in history as one of the most catastrophically wrong responses to a public health emergency ever recorded. After consultation with physicians, theologians, and civic leaders, they reached a conclusion that seems absurd to modern minds. The dancers were sick because they couldn't dance properly. The cure, they decided, was more dancing. The theory, based on medieval medical understanding, was that the afflicted had hot blood that needed to be cooled through continuous movement, like a fever that breaks through sweating. They believed the dancing sickness would resolve once the dancers had danced out all the corrupt humors in their bodies. So the city government hired professional musicians and built a wooden stage in the largest public square. They brought in healthy volunteers to dance with the afflicted, believing that proper dancing partners might help regulate the chaotic movements. They even paid for professional dancers to come from neighboring towns to demonstrate correct dancing techniques. The result was absolute disaster. The addition of music seemed to intensify the dancers' compulsions. Where before they had moved in silence to their own internal rhythms, now they were driven to match the external beat. Their movements became more violent, more coordinated, and far more dangerous. The professional dancers who came to help found themselves unable to leave the stage. One by one, they were drawn into the same uncontrollable state as the original victims. What had been intended as treatment became recruitment for the plague. The wooden stage meant to contain the dancing to one area instead became a focal point that drew even more spectators. The larger audiences led to more infections. The professional quality music, audible throughout the city, seemed to trigger the dancing compulsion in people who had never even seen the afflicted. Within days of implementing this cure, the number of active dancers had swollen from 30 to over 100. The city square became a scene from Dante's Inferno. Dozens of people trapped in uncontrollable motion, surrounded by musicians who couldn't stop playing lest the dancers become even more violent. watched by crowds who risked infection simply by observing. Contemporary accounts describe the scene as hell opened upon earth. The sound of 100 pairs of feet stamping on wooden platforms, accompanied by frantic music and the occasional scream of exhaustion or pain, could be heard throughout Strasbourg both day and night. The death toll mounts. What had begun as a bizarre curiosity quickly became a genuine public health catastrophe. The human body, it turns out, is not designed for continuous, uncontrolled movement for days on end. The first death occurred on the 7th day of the plague. Frau Troffea, the original dancer, collapsed mid-spin and never regained consciousness. The official cause of death was listed as exhaustion of the heart, but witnesses described something far more disturbing. According to those present, Frau Troffea didn't simply fall down. She danced herself to death. Her final movements became increasingly erratic and desperate, as if she were fighting against invisible chains. Her breathing became so labored that she could barely get air between the violent jerks and spasms of her body. When she finally collapsed, her limbs continued twitching for several minutes, as if the compulsion to dance was stronger than life itself. But Frau Troffea was just the beginning. Medical records from Strasbourg describe a litany of deaths that read like a medieval horror story. Some dancers died from heart failure, their organs simply unable to sustain the continuous exertion. Others succumbed to strokes, their brains starved of blood, as their bodies diverted all energy to the endless motion. Perhaps most disturbing were those who died from what medieval physicians called exhaustion of the soul. These dancers simply seemed to give up. They would continue moving, but their eyes would go blank, their faces would lose all expression, and they would dance until their bodies mechanically shut down, like broken clockwork. The dancers couldn't eat properly because they couldn't stay still long enough to consume a full meal. They couldn't sleep because the compulsion to move persisted, even when they were exhausted. They couldn't drink adequately because swallowing, while in constant motion, led to choking and vomiting. Dr. Paracelsus, who arrived in Strasbourg during the height of the plague, documented the physical deterioration in gruesome detail. He wrote of dancers whose feet had worn down to bloody stumps, whose joints had dislocated from the repetitive motions, whose muscles had essentially consumed themselves from the inside out. Some dancers developed what he called the dance fever. Their body temperature would spike to dangerous levels from the constant exertion, causing delirium and hallucinations that made their movements even more violent and unpredictable. By the end of July 1518, the death toll had reached dozens, with hundreds more afflicted and showing no signs of recovery. The city was running out of healthy citizens to care for the sick, and the economy had essentially ground to a halt as businesses closed and people fled to neighboring towns. Theories and explanations. Medieval versus modern. The dancing plague of 1518 left medieval society scrambling for explanations, and their theories reveal as much about 16th century psychology as they do about the plague itself. The most popular explanation among religious authorities was demonic possession. They pointed to the dancers' inability to stop when presented with holy relics, their apparent imperviousness to prayer, and the way the condition spread among observers as evidence of supernatural influence. Father Henrik Kramer, author of the notorious Malleus Maleficarum, The Hammer of Witches, personally investigated the Strasbourg outbreak. He concluded that the dancers were victims of a coordinated curse cast by a coven of witches intent on destroying Christian society. His recommendation was mass trials and executions of suspected witches, solution the city wisely rejected. Medical authorities of the time favored the hot blood theory mentioned earlier, but they also considered ergot poisoning from contaminated rye bread. Ergot contains compounds similar to LSD and can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and uncontrolled movements. However, this theory couldn't explain why the condition spread through observation rather than consumption of the same food source. Some physicians proposed melancholia, a medieval diagnosis roughly equivalent to severe depression, suggesting that the dancers were expressing suicidal thoughts through self-destructive motion. They noted that many of the afflicted came from the poorest sections of Strasbourg and had recently experienced significant hardships. Astrological explanations were also popular. The year 1518 had seen several unusual celestial events, including a particularly bright appearance of what we now know as Halley's Comet. Astrologers argued that these cosmic disturbances had created an evil influence that manifested as the dancing plague. Modern medical and psychological theories are far more sophisticated, but equally disturbing in their implications. The leading contemporary explanation is mass psychogenic illness, MPI, essentially a collective psychological breakdown triggered by extreme social stress. Strasbourg in 1518 was suffering from famine, disease, and political instability. The dancing plague may have been a community-wide psychological response to unbearable living conditions. This theory is supported by the fact that most dancers came from the poorest neighborhoods, had recently experienced personal tragedies, and that the condition spread through observation, all classic characteristics of mass hysteria events. However, some modern researchers argue for a neurological explanation. They point to cases of encephalitis lethargica, sleeping sickness, that can cause compulsive movement disorders, a viral infection affecting the brain's motor control. Centers could theoretically cause the symptoms observed in Strasbourg. Even more intriguing is the possibility of an early form of what we now call conversion disorder, a condition where psychological trauma manifests as physical symptoms. The dancers may have been unconsciously expressing their desperation and hopelessness through the only form of expression available to them, movement. But perhaps the most unsettling modern theory is that the dancing plague was an early example of social contagion, the way behaviors, emotions, and ideas can spread through populations like infectious diseases. In our hyper-connected modern world, we see similar phenomena in everything from viral social media challenges to mass shootings to conspiracy theories. The dancing plague of 1518 might have been humanity's first recorded example of an idea becoming literally contagious, spreading from mind to mind and manifesting as physical compulsion. The end of the dance, the dancing plague finally ended, not through medical intervention or religious exorcism, but through what might be the most bizarre prescription in medical history: a pilgrimage to a shrine dedicated to a saint who was believed to control dancing. By early August 1518, with the death toll mounting and the city's economy in collapse, the authorities abandoned all their previous strategies. Instead, they organized a mass pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Vitus in the nearby town of Hohenstein. St. Vitus was a peculiar choice for a cure. He was the patron saint of dancers and actors, but also, and crucially, the saint invoked to cure St. Vitus dance, a medieval term for what we now know as Huntington's disease and other neurological disorders causing involuntary movements. The logistics of moving over 400 uncontrollably dancing people on a pilgrimage were staggering. The city hired dozens of carts and wagons, along with enough healthy citizens to physically restrain the dancers during transport. The procession that left Strasbourg on August 3, 1518, was unlike anything Europe had ever seen. Contemporary accounts describe a miles-long caravan of dancing people, some restrained in carts, others walking while continuing their compulsive movements, all accompanied by family members, physicians, priests, and curious onlookers. The sound of the procession, hundreds of people in various stages of uncontrolled motion, accompanied by prayers, weeping, and the creaking of wooden wheels could be heard from miles away. Street musicians were required to obtain permits and could be arrested if their music was deemed too rhythmic or compelling. The wooden stage built to cure the dancers was burned, and the square was consecrated to prevent any recurrence. The economic impact was staggering. Strasbourg lost nearly 15% of its adult population to death, disability, or immigration following the plague. Entire neighborhoods had been abandoned as families fled in terror. It took over a decade for the city to fully recover its pre-plague prosperity. But perhaps the most lasting impact was on the collective memory of medieval Europe. Word of the dancing plague spread throughout the continent, inspiring fear, fascination, and copycat outbreaks. Accounts of similar but smaller dancing plagues emerged from at least a dozen other European cities over the following decades. The event also profoundly influenced European attitudes toward mass gatherings, public health, and the relationship between mind and body. It was one of the first recorded instances where authorities recognized that psychological factors could cause genuine physical illness, laying early groundwork for what would eventually become the field of psychiatry. Modern echoes. Are we still dancing? The dancing plague of 1518 might seem like a bizarre historical curiosity, but its echoes reverberate through modern society in ways that should make us deeply uncomfortable. Consider the phenomenon of viral social media challenges that compel people to engage in dangerous or self-destructive behavior. From the ice bucket challenge to more harmful trends like the Tide Pod challenge or the Momo challenge, we see the same pattern. An idea spreads through observation. People feel compelled to participate despite recognizing the risks, and the behavior spreads far beyond its original context. Mass hysteria events continue to occur in our supposedly rational modern world. The 2016 clown sightings phenomenon saw thousands of people across multiple countries reporting encounters with threatening clowns. Despite little physical evidence, the report spread through social media, creating a genuine public safety crisis based largely on shared psychological contagion. Even more disturbing are modern examples of conversion disorders and mass psychogenic illness. In 2011, dozens of teenage girls in Leroy, New York, suddenly developed tics, twitches, and involuntary vocalizations that spread through their social network. In 2012, over 200 factory workers in Cambodia suddenly fainted and experienced convulsions, shutting down production for days. These modern dancing plagues follow the same patterns as the 1518 outbreak. They affect people under stress. They spread through social connections. They cause genuine physical symptoms, and they resist conventional medical treatment. Perhaps most unsettling is the recognition that our hyper-connected digital age might make us more susceptible to such contagions, not less. Social media allows ideas, behaviors, and psychological states to spread faster and farther than ever before. We're all potentially just one viral video away from our own version of the dancing plague. The citizens of Strasbourg in 1518 couldn't understand how an idea could become physically contagious. They lived in a world where information traveled at the speed of horses and word of mouth. Yet they experienced one of history's most dramatic examples of social contagion. We live in a world where information travels at the speed of light and reaches billions of people simultaneously. We have far more sophisticated understanding of psychology, neurology, and social dynamics. Yet we continue to see the same fundamental phenomenon. Human consciousness is far more fragile and interconnected than we like to believe. The dancing plague reminds us that the line between individual and collective experience is thinner than we imagine. It suggests that under the right conditions of stress, fear, and social pressure, entire communities can lose their grip on reality in ways that manifest as genuine physical illness. In the end, the dancing plague of 1518 serves as both a historical curiosity and a modern warning. It reveals the terrifying fragility of human consciousness and the devastating power of social contagion. Frau Troffea stepped into that street in Strasbourg and began dancing because something in her, mind or body, compelled her to move. Whether it was psychological trauma, neurological illness, or something else entirely, we may never know. But her individual crisis became a collective nightmare because human beings are fundamentally social creatures, connected to each other in ways we still don't fully understand. The hundreds of people who joined her dance weren't weak or gullible. They were ordinary citizens living through extraordinary stress, and they fell victim to one of the most basic features of human psychology, our tendency to mirror and mimic the behavior of those around us. The dancing plague ended at the shrine of St. Vitus, but the conditions that created it never went away. Social stress, economic inequality, political instability, and the fundamental human need for meaning and connection continue to exist. In our modern world, they may be more intense than ever. We are all potential dancers, waiting for the right combination of stress, suggestion, and social pressure to begin our own uncontrollable movements. The rhythm might be different viral challenges, conspiracy theories, mass panic, political extremism, but the underlying mechanism remains the same. The people of Strasbourg learned that ideas can be contagious, that consciousness is fragile, and that the boundary between individual and collective experience can collapse without warning. The question is, what will it take for us to learn the same lessons? And when the next plague begins, whatever form it takes, will we recognize it for what it is before it's too late to stop the dance? Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the dancing plague is that we still don't know exactly why it started or why it stopped. 500 years later, with all our scientific knowledge and technological sophistication, the events of 1518 remain fundamentally mysterious. This suggests something profound and unsettling about human nature. There are aspects of our collective psychology that we still don't understand, forces that can compel us to behave in ways that defy rational explanation, contagions of the mind that spread faster than any virus and prove just as deadly. The dancers of Strasbourg are long dead, but their story lives on as a reminder that we are not as rational, individual, or in control as we like to believe. We are social creatures, vulnerable to the same psychological contagions that turned a prosperous medieval city into a scene from hell. And somewhere, in some stressed community facing unbearable pressures, the next dance may already be beginning.